Hello, welcome to another edition of the Flyer Sports Podcast. I'm Chris Mackowiak, sports editor of the Flyer, alongside me, sports reporter at the Flyer, Zach Gilleland, and now joining us, news editor Chase Gorski, back to his sports roots after he was a practicum student for me last semester. So we're in the meat of CAC playoffs right now with multiple teams in action. First thing we'll go through, brilliant soccer performances, both teams getting first round wins as we look through the CAC. Women's soccer getting the win at home 3-0. Zach was at that game along with Ethan Wilt. The recap up online, and just a dominant performance for the Sea Gulls over the 6th seed Penn State Harrisburg.
Well, hello, Christopher. Thank you for having me on again. It was a big 3-0 victory over Penn State Harrisburg, and I mean, kudos to Penn State Harrisburg, their first CAC tournament, but a brilliant job by the Salisbury offense. A little bit of rejuvenation after getting shut out by the top two teams in the tournament in Frostburg State and Christopher Newport, but 6 goals versus Wesley and then 3 goals. So it seems at times where this offense takes a little bit for them to get going, but able to get big goals. And Ruthie Lucas, again, how can we not mention her 22 career goals? And Brooke Rosser really coming on as a freshman. Talked to Coach about her and talking about her growth as a freshman, but defense was really solid, allowed 18 shots, a couple prayers answered by a couple crossbar saves by the goal. So clean sheet for Hope Knutsman. Not a lot facing her on the defensive side, but 18 shots and all around good performance for the Gulls. Now going to face Frostburg State in a matchup we all know too well.
Yeah, it was a 1-0 victory for Frostburg State when Salisbury went there earlier this season. Seagulls ended CAC play 7-2, only losses to CNU and Frostburg State, the two teams ahead of them in the standings. So Frostburg State as the 2 seed will host the 3 seed Salisbury. You mentioned Hope Knutsman, 10 saves, one of her highest totals of the season against Penn State Harrisburg, and give credit to the Lady Lions, had 18 shots, Zach, after only tallying, I believe, 4 against Salisbury during the regular season match, which was a 2-0 victory for Salisbury. Salisbury only 14 shots compared to their 27 shots against Penn State Harrisburg earlier this season.
They say an old phrase that numbers never lie. The numbers kind of lied. They were a little skewed. Penn State Harrisburg had 18 shots, but they didn't have necessarily the chances that they wanted. Salisbury's defense, absolutely fantastic. Defending the Bosch, Jamie Taka, and Kayla Homeyer, the freshman, a senior freshman duo there, really taking out Kristen Stark, the second leading goal scorer in the CAC. And for Penn State Harrisburg, they had 2 fantastic opportunities where they had 2 shots off the crossbar, looked to be their best options. But other than that, they really just forced a lot of shots. The passing wasn't there. It seemed they were just content on just trying to find it to Kristen Stark and just let her deal with it there, but facing a double team on Taka and Homeyer, just really unable to get anything done. But credit the Sea Gull defense. Yeah, 18 shots allowed, but really most of those shots were just forced shots outside the box that Hope Knutsman made easy saves on.
Yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Ruthie Lucas. 11 goals, by far her most in the season, in her career. The senior striker really getting things going for this offense over the course of the 2017 season. One thing I do want you to talk about a little bit, Zach, is what happened in the 79th minute, the red card to Carly-Ann Laguerre. You mentioned it was kind of a physical game out there, touch back and forth, at times ticky-tacky stuff. But Laguerre, with that red card, will miss the semifinal match. And despite her not having big stats on the season, she's come in and progressed into a starter in her senior season and really a great holding midfielder out there for the team.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really huge loss for the Sea Gulls in that matchup against Frostburg State. She had her first goal of the season against Wesley, but you just talk about the physicality that she brings to the table. She's always pushing players off the ball, a lot of great footwork, able to move around the ball. Her and Dana Gordon in that midfield, really 2 offensive playmakers. I didn't get a chance to see what happened. I was looking down and looked up, and all of a sudden a red card happened, and the first thing I noticed is, oh no, she's going to be out for that Frostburg game. So a really big loss for the Sea Gulls. And just going back to, I got a chance to talk to the players and Coach Lloyd after the game, and they knew this was going to be a physical battle. They were talking about the matchup earlier. They won 2-0, but they knew there was going to be a lot of pushing and shoving. A lot of people don't like each other. A yellow card for Penn State Harrisburg early on in a collision with Jamie Taka, but it's a huge loss for Carly-Ann Laguerre. Could possibly be her last game as a Sea Gull, that matchup against Penn State Harrisburg. So it's a big loss because she doesn't have the numbers that maybe a Ruthie Lucas or a Juliana Pollard have at that forward group. But she really plays hard in the midfield, toward the middle of the field, making crisp passes to players. And really just attacking the defensive unit for an opposing team, just getting the ball and forcing players off the ball.
Yeah, once again, women's soccer will continue their run. Honestly, looking at their resume, probably won't make the NCAA tournament without the CAC championship. They'll try to keep that run going against Frostburg State on Wednesday, a 2 versus 3 matchup. Time still to be determined out in Frostburg, Maryland. Next up, let's take a look at men's soccer. A tight one, to say the least. 8-7 win on penalty kicks after 1-1 in the regulation period at York, and a big win for a 5th seed Salisbury. All three of us have gotten to spend time with this men's soccer team over the course of the season, but really, Chase, it came down to Trevor Brookhart again, and we were talking about it earlier today, him stepping up. It was a 3-man goalkeeping battle at the beginning of the season. You and I were broadcasting for the team when they were trying to feel out maybe if Brookhart was the guy for the opening season tournament of the Elmer Lord Soccer Classic annually. And he really stepped up, put up great numbers throughout this season, and really a strong suit on a defense that has been the backbone of this team.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, first off, just want to start, got to thank you for bringing me on today, of course. But yeah, an important showing for the Sea Gulls, especially. We were on that call when they played them in the regular season, and what a chippy game we saw. It was great, honestly. It was great to see through the whole game. We didn't see anything that really overflowed from that game. I mean, a few yellows here and there, but nothing bad. Colby Fell, obviously, in that regular season matchup, had the red card with about, I want to say, 10 seconds to go. But, yeah, you mentioned Brookhart. I mean, he's just been huge for this team, and who would have thought that in the playoffs you have a chance to execute offensively and then win a game once again defensively. So I don't think Coach Hargrove could have thought that coming into this season with a 3-person battle at goal, they would have walked away with what they have in Trevor Brookhart. But, I mean, what a blessing it's been for him so far this year. And one of the things he attributed to it was the battle. You know, you've got those other 2 goalies behind him that are pushing him, and I think that really has helped Brookhart to kind of elevate his play, and we've seen it.
Yeah, the other 2 goalkeepers, Sam Roy and Ben Gentry, Coach Hargrove has told us they still put up a battle in practice. It's really tough every week for them. But Brookhart, the JUCO transfer, coming in, stabilizing the position in a big questionable area with Salisbury having a strong history of great goalkeepers. He comes in, and here in the first round of the CAC, puts up 10 saves on 11 shots on goal, and really an excellent performance for him. Of course, Zach, the only goal for Salisbury, coming from Nick Carrington, who has been fantastic from the penalty spot his entire career. Hasn't missed one yet in his career. Don't want to jinx him, but it's really amazing that the left center back of Salisbury is your go-to man on the penalty spot. And Coach Hargrove said, well, if he keeps hitting them, I'm not going to take him out of that spot. And just so many games this season that it has come down to a penalty kick, and Salisbury's been able to get points out of that penalty spot.
Yeah, and especially where the offense hasn't been rolling to especially the way that they wanted. Maybe in this season, but you got to give credit to Nick Carrington, putting in that tight spot with the team down in a goal, facing elimination possibly, and going, or able to get that goal. And him and Stephen White, 2 of the most efficient goal scorers in the country. White has 4 goals on the season in 4 shots, so give credit where credit's due. But for Salisbury, a huge win against a York squad they know they wanted to beat. They had that tough physical matchup where little pushing and shoving, extracurricular activities throughout, but it's a huge win for the Sea Gulls now having to go to Christopher Newport, and obviously a game that they can beat, or a team that they can beat in Christopher Newport. Obviously, the number 1 team in the CAC, and this is a team that they always play really well. And we know that rivalry between CNU and Salisbury in pretty much every sport here. But they tied that game, or they had a draw in that first matchup this season, and then played them hard to the very end last season. So obviously a winnable game here.
Yeah, and that's the good thing. They've really frustrated the captains on the road, too, after some tough losses before that, and got it done for a big point, a point that really helped them in the table later on. And, we always say defense can win championships. This defense is top-notch for Salisbury. Who knows? They can squeak out maybe a 1-0 win on a Carrington PK or something down the line. You never know. They're still the 5th seed, though, so they probably won't see any home field advantage down the line. But they'll be playing in the CAC semifinals on Wednesday at CNU. Time still to be determined, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Next, let's take a look at football, guys, for the weekend. 33-0 victory for Salisbury. And all it was domination from the get-go. Just their the first time they had consecutive shutouts. They did beat SVU 42-0 last week. First time with consecutive shutouts since 1976. So it really speaks to how strong this defense has been. In a top-heavy NJAC, though, you have to admit. But still, this is the backbone for the team. Missing some key pieces offensively the last few weeks, but able to really shine down the line. And maybe the difference in a Wesley or a Frostburg State win could be this defense hanging in there.
I think one of the biggest things you see looking back at these games is that, there hasn't been that close game. I mean, they played Keene slightly close when they went and visited them and up by 8, but I mean, other than that, mostly just some dominant wins from the football squad.
Hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I have never had as much faith in this defense as I do now, because we always have those questions with the Salisbury defense.
Hey, I agree with you.
Last season, we always have questions with the secondary. We know the run defense has always been great for Salisbury, and they've lost a lot of pieces. Christian Wilson, Andre Boone's out for the season, Jory Matherson from last season. So this is a team that, especially when you play a Wesley, such an air raid offense, it's so difficult to play. I was on that game last year writing for the Flyer, and it was a really tough matchup. It seemed Wesley, even having the ball in their own 5-yard line, could take a 95-yard drive, but just passing the ball through the air. So it's obviously the toughest stretch of the season. Obviously, Rowan doesn't have the offense that they did last year with that 2-quarterback system. But credit to Salisbury's defense, able to get that shutout. And even games that they know they should win, the defense has been fantastic so far. Saw a little bit of problems in the secondary against Southern Virginia, where a little bit of blown coverages that were kind of rewarded by bad throws by the quarterback. But it's toughest matchup of the season upcoming for the NJAC Championship, the Route 13 battle against Wesley. Honestly, the really toughest matchup all season. You get Frostburg State at home, that always helps, but going on the road at Wesley, the last time Salisbury went to Wesley, they were able to win, but as we know with that rivalry, Salisbury really hasn't had a lot of success against the Wolverines.
Yeah, and the Salisbury defense hasn't let up more than 13 points in their last 7 games. Really impressive stretch, but Zach, you make a good point. It's just what Salisbury team are we going to see against Wesley? Are we going to see a team that, like, not to say this way, but if they fall flat on their faces against a top 15 team, or do they earn that ranking? They moved into the top 25 this week. Are they on the national stage for a reason? A close loss to a talented Albright team to start the season, but since then, all this team has done is learn along the way and grown together. This defense, as you mentioned, great chemistry. Been broadcasting for them for 3 seasons. I've never seen the offense this good. The CNU win 17-7. That's when I really said to myself, this defense is something, and we're probably going to be talking about them more than this triple option at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough matchup against Wesley, and honestly, this is maybe the first time that Wesley game isn't going to be decided by whoever scores 40 points. It may be a lower scoring game that we're not used to seeing. Last year, Wesley came away with a 44-27 win, but for Salisbury, it's really going to be apparent on that offense. We know the defense has been fantastic all season long, but the offense just hasn't been producing the way that they're used to, averaging 100 less yards per game. And we know Brandon Lewis, the senior leader on this team, just, I hate to say it, not as great of a passer as Ryan Jones' predecessor, but he's a fantastic runner. May not give you the reads as a read option quarterback, but a really great runner. It seems like he's not reading the defense, but he's been able to make plays. We saw in that Southern Virginia game, just breaks down the defense, just goes through the middle of the field and could always find something. He got injured in that game. Very next play, he came back in, 25-yard rushing touchdown. So he may not be reading the defense like maybe Coach Wood would want him to, but he's been successful all this season. But with a team like Wesley, if you get behind on if Wesley takes the lead, Salisbury's going to have to rely on the passing game. That's something that Salisbury hasn't had to do all this season, is when they're trailing, having to go to the air. So if they're down by a touchdown or 2 touchdowns, this is something that we haven't been able to see all year, is how this offense is going to do under pressure, especially throwing the ball, because honestly, they haven't had the success they've wanted throwing the ball this season, and it's going to be really interesting to see playing against a Wesley team so good on offense and defense. Yeah,
it's Wesley week here for Salisbury football. That will kick off at noon up in Dover, Delaware, just about an hour drive, so make it out if you have a chance to be up there on Saturday. As we mentioned, the football team, it's a rivalry, pure and simple, now within a conference in the end, Jack. And a lot of these players, two in particular from Dover, grew up around this Wesley team. That's Tim Stein, the punter, and also the starting center now, Tyler Rosello. I'll actually have an in-depth interview with Tyler coming to the Flyer this week online about his connections and his family to the Wesley past, and really how tough it was to maybe leave Dover to come down here to Salisbury with his familial connections. So check that out if you have time this week. Also, hoping to get Brandon Lewis in Under the Feathers, that weekly column that we run. So check that out too. Finally, let's take a look at field hockey. They'll finally be back in action on Wednesday in the CAC semifinals against York, the number 2 versus number 3 seeds, and it's an interesting matchup. Salisbury really dominated 3-0 on the road against the Spartans earlier this season, but give credit to Katie Foss. I got to talk to on the phone when I did that Chamberlain coaching tree article. Really nice woman, great coach, really trying to embrace what Chamberlain taught her headed into York this season. And all she's done is bring York back really into prominence in the top 20 and led them places they haven't been before. If they do lose to Salisbury, they'll most likely get an at-large bid too. They have excellent resume wins, but an intriguing matchup for sure, Zach.
Yeah, it's really intriguing, and give credit to York. We always talk about Salisbury and CNU as two of the power teams in the CAC, but York's steadily improving on pretty much everything. The women's soccer team didn't have the success they wanted this season, but the men's team, that 4 seed in the tournament, and then their lacrosse team's obviously a national power. Both teams fighting in the CAC championship game against Salisbury, and even their basketball team split in the regular season against Salisbury. That double overtime matchup against Salisbury, you were on the call, just a fantastic game. So York is steadily improving to one of the power teams in the CAC, but a matchup against Salisbury here at home. Salisbury has had the success at home realistically. They have over 100 wins at home than they do losses in this new millennium. But it's a year of first for the Seagulls. It's the first time that they lost their home opener in the new millennium, the first time they lost their CAC opener. So it's a different squad this season. We lost a lot of players last season, a lot of youth on this team. No Becca Ronica, Abby Show, Hannah Miller on the defensive side. Hannah Miller's still here as an assistant coach, but not really leading the team on the field per se. But this is a young team that had some growing pains over the year, but they stick with the top teams in the country. They had that heartbreaking loss against Catholic. That's obviously a tough road matchup. Yeah. Salisbury and Catholic, a really intense rivalry over the last few years. They play each other so well, and even when Salisbury was absolutely fantastic last season, they only went away with a 2-0 win against them. That tough loss to Christopher Newport, and Christopher Newport's, again, emerging in pretty much every sport. They're good at every sport, people. And then that they hung in with Messiah, the number 1 team in the country, who defeated one of the top Division II teams in Shippensburg.
Took them to overtime. Give them credit,
It's absolutely insane to think that a D3 school is hanging in with one of the top D2 power programs. So, but Salisbury, they took Messiah to overtime. Obviously, a call that Coach Chamberlain obviously didn't like, that ended up giving a power play for Messiah able to come away with a win. But this is a team that, although they have young talent, they have a mix of veteran and young talent, led by maybe a Natalie Wilkinson on the offensive side and Tressie Windsor on the defensive side. But we see a lot of sophomores on this team and a lot of depth to build off in the future. You talk about maybe 2 or 3 years from now, this team could be one of the best in the country. If not, they already are right now, a top 10 team, and only 3 losses decided by 1 goal in both those games, or in all 3 of those games. This is a scary team, and if Salisbury able to get past York, it's going to be a fantastic matchup against Christopher Newport.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see that how this team has matured over the course of the season, how they'll face a captain squad that did beat them earlier this season in a close 1-0 loss, and how maybe this youth handles that in the end.
Well, one of the biggest things that Zach was talking on, I wanted to just kind of go right off of that, was I know a lot of the question marks with this team. I mean, unfortunately, I haven't been able to be on too many calls for it, but I know one of the bigger things was the lack of offense. That was a really big question mark, but now, they're kind of in a point where that no longer matters necessarily, where you don't need an influx of goals. All that matters is the win. Yeah. And so now they're coming into this position. Zach mentioned a team full of youth, where it's really impressive to see them just battle throughout this whole year, get wins when they can, and now they're to the point where that's all that matters. If they can win the game, who cares how they're able to do it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really important thing. You grow over the course of the season. Who knows what this team will do in the NCAA tournament? They could host, probably not at this point, but it's going to come down to the line. But it's a fun team to watch. Always the youth is a fun team to watch. Something that we'll probably see with some of the basketball teams here in the winter upcoming. Finally, just wanted to get overall thoughts as we move ahead. Volleyball hosting a first-round matchup against York, 4 versus 5 seed here in Max Physical Activity Center, 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. I'll be at that game. It looks like either Zach or Chase will be at the field hockey game on Wednesday for the Flyers, so I'll have both of those covered for you. All the CAC championship action, if it does occur, might be multiple Salisbury versus CNU matchups this Saturday, so stay tuned for that for sure. But as we move into the week, really past Wednesday, who knows what will happen as we'll move into the NCAA tournament action. A lot going on for sure.
Yeah, as I noted, the very first sentence in my broadcast for the women's soccer game, it's the most wonderful time of the year if you're a sports fan. It's playoff times, it's win or go home, so a lot of tough matchups upcoming, but all teams essentially on the road except, volleyball and field hockey. So tough match for volleyball as they play York in a tough matchup that they lost a few weeks ago to the Spartans, but a chance to come back at home, see what the team has, know their tendencies, and try to pull out a win. But it's an interesting week for sports. Let's just hope to see if it continues going.
I think it'll definitely be an exciting time. I know we don't know really where any team can go. Just like Zach said earlier, really interesting, neat to see York, making a presence in every sport and also kind of reignites that rivalry. I think, Chris, that was one of the things that we got to see for soccer, and now we're kind of seeing it on an even greater scale in the playoffs for all these different sports. And you got to think, for volleyball primarily, they've kind of had to wait around and see where their path is going to be, because it was determined from all these different teams. So they definitely have been chomping at the bit, especially now seeing York. They had that regular season loss, and the teams kind of had a little bit left to be desired in some of their games, not really been able to finish out a couple of those top teams at home. So really not sure where the Sea Gulls could be standing in any sport at the end of this week, but a lot of room for an exciting week if you're a Salisbury fan.
Yeah, for sure, and we'll see how that action plays out as we move ahead in the week. Again, we know men's and women's soccer both on the road Wednesday, most likely at night at Frostburg State, and CNU volleyball will host York in a first-round match on Tuesday night, and field hockey at home against York on Wednesday in the CAC semifinals. Saturday, football will travel up to Dover to face Wesley in what will be a top 25 matchup, and a fun one at that, headed into the final 2 weeks of the season. Right after this, since it's raining outside, we're going to just record also another fun podcast looking at the college football rankings here as we move into college football playoff week number 1 as the rankings come out from the committee officially on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. That will be a more heated debate in a few minutes. But I'd like to thank Chase and Zach for joining in on this and giving their thoughts. A lot of articles coming up in this week with a print edition next Tuesday, so stay tuned for everything on Flyer Sports. Always like to thank our loyal fan base and the athletes out there, make our jobs a lot easier and a lot more interesting. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Enjoy the rain, and stay tuned for our next podcast here for the Flyer Sports.